The air in Rivendell was heavy with the weight of centuries. As Elenian stepped into the ancient archives, the shadows of history pressing upon his shoulders. The marble floors beneath his feet whispered with every step, and the faint scent of parchment and ink mingled in the air. It was a quiet place, reserved for secrets too old and too fragile for the outside world. But today, the silence felt different, as if it too sensed that something significant was about to unfold. Elenian, a scholar of the elven histories, moved with purpose. His long, dark hair shimmered like the night sky as he walked past rows of shelves that stretched up like ancient trees in a forgotten forest. But it wasn't the volumes of lore that had brought him here. It was the discovery of a single relic, a Palantíri, one of the seeing stones, long thought to be lost, hidden away from the reach of men and elves alike. He approached the table where the stone lay, its dark surface catching the flickering light of the nearby torch. The Palantíri was unlike any Elenian had seen before. Most of the stones had been shaped with grace, their surfaces smooth and polished, but this one was different. It pulsed with an unnatural aura, as though something lingered within, something dark. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for it, and a strange sensation filled his mind, as if the stone was calling to him. The air grew colder, and Elenian felt a shiver run down his spine. He slowly picked up the Palantíri, holding it with reverence and caution. His eyes traced the markings etched into its surface, runes unfamiliar to him, curling in shapes that twisted unnaturally, as though they were written by hands not of this world. The stone felt warm in his grasp, its power undeniable. It hummed with a life of its own, ancient and profound. And as Elenian gazed deeper into it, the stone seemed to reach into his very soul. "Ah, Elenian, I see you found it," said a voice from behind. Elenian turned to find Elrond standing in the doorway, his expression grave. His ageless face held a shadow of concern, and his piercing eyes studied the stone with an intensity that made Elenian feel as if he were being weighed and measured. "This is the one," Elenian whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "The lost Palantíri. I can feel it. Something is different about it." Elrond nodded solemnly, stepping into the room. "It was hidden away for a reason, Elenian. The Palantíri are not mere relics of power. They are instruments of control, and their history is a dark one. This particular stone," he paused, his gaze lingering on the Palantíri. "It was twisted, corrupted by Sauron long ago. His influence lingers within, and it may be the key to understanding what became of the Blue Wizards." "The Blue Wizards?" Elenian asked, his voice thick with curiosity. "But they were lost, weren't they? Their fates buried in shadow." Elrond's expression darkened, and he stepped closer, his gaze flickering toward the stone, as if it held more than just an answer. It held a warning. "Yes, they were lost, but not as you think. The truth of their disappearance is far darker than the Elenian, corrupted by this very stone. It was never simply a tool for seeing the future. It was a means of ensnaring the hearts of those who used it, twisting their desires, fueling their darkest ambitions. Elenian's breath caught in his throat. The blue wizards, what happened to them? They were sent east to counter Sauron's growing power, but they fell into a trap of their own making. They sought to use the power of the Palantíri to control and manipulate, believing they could bend the forces of darkness to their will. In the end, it was their ambition that brought about their downfall, just as it did with many before them. Elrond sighed deeply. And now this stone, this very stone that corrupted them, is here, in Rivendell, after centuries of being hidden away. Elenian stared at the stone, his mind racing. But why now? Why was it uncovered? That is what we must understand, Elrond replied. There are forces at work that have long been forgotten. The stone's influence may have faded with time, but not all of its power has been destroyed. The curse of the Palantíri lingers, and it may very well be awakening once again. A silence fell between them, heavy with the weight of Elrond's words. Elenian felt a strange pull toward the stone, as though it were calling to him, urging him to delve deeper into its mysteries. But a creeping fear rose within him. What would he uncover if he chose to pursue this path? The blue wizards, Elenian said quietly, almost to himself. They sought to change the tide of history, and in doing so, they were undone by their own folly. Yes, Elrond agreed. And now their legacy is something that we must learn from. We cannot let the same fate befall us, Elenian. Elenian held the Palantir up to the light, feeling the strange warmth pulse through his fingers. What should I do? Elrond's eyes softened, a glimmer of sadness in them. I cannot tell you what to do. You must follow your heart, but be wary of the stone's power. If you choose to delve deeper, you must prepare for the consequences. Elenian nodded, feeling the weight of his decision pressing upon him. I will learn the truth, he said, determination building in his voice. I must understand what happened to the blue wizards and what they saw in the Palantir that drove them to their doom. As Elenian turned back to the stone, Elrond's voice stopped him once more. Beware, Elenian. Some knowledge is too dangerous to uncover, and some truths are better left buried in the past. Elenian glanced back at Elrond, his heart heavy. I know the risks, he replied, but the past cannot remain hidden forever. If the Palantíri's curse is to be undone, I must understand it fully. With that, Elenian closed his eyes, feeling the weight of history upon him. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. He could never turn back. The air in Rivendell grew still as Elenian stared into the depths of the Palantir, the whispers of the past beginning to stir in his mind. The stone pulsed with a strange power, drawing him deeper into its mysteries. And somewhere, in the distant echoes of time, the faintest glimmer of the blue wizard's long-lost voices seemed to call out from the depths of the stone, urging him forward into the shadows of the east. Elenian's journey had only just begun, and the weight of Middle-earth's ancient history pressed upon him, a burden he could never escape. The light of the late afternoon sun filtered through the great windows of Rivendell, casting elongated shadows over the polished stone floors. The air was thick with the scent of parchment, ancient ink, and the ever-present hum of wisdom that reverberated through the library's grand halls. Elenian sat before an old, worn desk, his fingers idly tracing the edges of a weathered scroll. But today his mind was elsewhere. The discovery had been sudden, yet inevitable, a Palantír buried deep within the archives of Rivendell. The stone was unlike the others. It emanated a subtle, unearthly glow, as though something dark pulsed within its depths. Elenian had been drawn to it, unable to resist the temptation of its mysteries, the promise of knowledge that lay within. And now, as he sat before it, the weight of that temptation pressed heavily upon him. He reached out slowly, cautiously, as if the stone might bite back. His fingers brushed the smooth surface, and the moment his skin made contact, a vision unfurled before his eyes. A dark, oppressive sky stretched over a land barren and broken, and in the distance, a towering fortress stood, its spires like jagged teeth piercing the heavens. The air was thick with the acrid stench of smoke and ruin. The ground trembled beneath the weight of an unseen force, and in the distance, figures cloaked in shadow moved toward him. The vision shifted, and now he stood in the great halls of Gondor, before the throne of a king, his face obscured by shadow. The stone seemed to pulse in time with the king's heavy breathing, the air thick with fear and doubt. The vision shifted again, and now Elenian could see the hand of the king reaching out toward the Palantír of Orthanc, its dark influence slipping into his mind, like poison dripping into a chalice. The vision shattered, and Elenian was left breathless, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked down at the Palantír, its surface now smooth and lifeless, as if nothing had ever occurred. The room was still, and yet Elenian knew he had glimpsed something far darker than he had anticipated. By the valor, he whispered under his breath. His hands trembled as he set the stone down, as if the very touch of it had altered something within him. His mind raced, the implications of what he had seen beginning to piece themselves together like the fragments of a shattered mirror. The king, the Palantír, the darkness, it all pointed to something sinister, something that had been hidden for far too long. He stood up abruptly, his robes rustling as he moved toward the door of the study. The call for answers was insistent, but the truth it demanded was not one Elenian was ready to face. He found Elrond in the great hall, standing before a large, arched window, gazing out at the valley below. The half-elf turned as Elenian entered, his keen eyes immediately assessing the gravity of his apprentice's expression. "Elenian, what troubles you?" Elrond asked, his voice soft, but filled with an unmistakable weight of concern. Elenian did not hesitate. "I have seen it, Elrond, the vision of the king, the Palantír of Orthanc. I believe it was Sauron's influence, hidden within the stone. It was no mere object of prophecy. The Palantír was his tool, a means of controlling minds, bending the will of those who sought to use it." Elrond's face remained impassive, but there was a flicker in his eyes. "You speak of the curse, then," he murmured, as though the words tasted bitter on his tongue. "The curse?" Elenian asked, stepping closer, his voice trembling. "You knew of it?" Elrond nodded, his gaze falling to the floor. The Palantíri were not merely tools for sight. They were created by the Valor to guide and counsel. Yes, but they were also bound with great power that Sauron twisted to his will. "The stone you have discovered," he paused, looking at Elenian, his face drawn with a deep sadness. "It was not just an artifact. It was a weapon, a device of manipulation, designed to ensnare the hearts of men and elves alike." Elenian felt a cold chill run through him. The implications were staggering. But how did they fall prey to it? "Sauron's influence was subtle," Elrond replied. "The kings of Gondor, in particular, were the most susceptible. The Palantír of Orthanc was the stone that ultimately broke them. It showed them visions of power, of victory, of a world where they held dominion over all. But it also showed them the path to corruption. The curse was always there, lying in wait." Elenian swallowed, the weight of the realization sinking in. So it was not merely a tool of foresight, but a trap, a device to guide them into Sauron's embrace. Elrond nodded slowly. Yes, and the curse did not end with Gondor. It spread, affecting those who used the Palantíri, even after the fall of the Dark Lord. They were never truly free of his touch. Elenian felt the walls of the room close in around him. He had always believed that the stones were instruments of wisdom, tools to guide those who were wise enough to use them. But now he understood the terrible truth. They were not instruments of guidance. They were instruments of control. "And what of the blue wizards?" Elenian asked, his voice tinged with urgency. "What role did they play in all this?" Elrond's expression darkened. "The blue wizards, they too fell victim to Sauron's influence. They were sent to the east to combat his forces. But their journey took them into places where the darkness had already taken root. They became ensnared by the same power that had corrupted the kings of Númenor and Gondor. The Palantíri were a part of that." Elenian's mind reeled, his heart heavy with the burden of the truth. "And the darkness that once consumed the kings of Gondor, it is still out there, waiting." Elrond's gaze grew distant, as though seeing something far beyond the present. "It is not gone, Elenian. The curse of the Palantíri lingers in the hearts of those who still possess them, in those who heavy with the weight of the past and the shadows of the future. Elenian's thoughts were in turmoil, the reality of what he had uncovered beginning to settle into his bones. The Palantíri were not just relics of a forgotten age, they were harbingers of doom, tied to the very soul of Middle-earth. "What should I do now, Elrond?" Elenian asked, his voice strained. "How do we stop this curse?" Elrond placed a hand on his shoulder, his grip firm yet gentle. "We must keep searching, Elenian. The answers are hidden in the past, and it is up to us to uncover them before the darkness rises again." Elenian nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of the task before him. As he gazed once more at the Palantir, the dark stone in Rivendell's quiet halls, he knew that his journey had only just begun, and the truth he sought would come with a cost, one that he was unsure he was prepared to pay. The weight of the stone was heavy in Elenian's hands, its dark surface gleaming faintly in the candlelight. The visions it had shown him, the shadows of Gondor's kings, the ancient curse, would not be easily forgotten. The stone hummed with a sinister energy, as if beckoning him to learn more, to dive deeper into the dark waters of Middle-earth's past. But Elenian was afraid of what he might uncover, and afraid of what that knowledge might demand of him. Yet the lure of the Palantir was undeniable, and with each passing moment he found himself drawn deeper into its web. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the darkness of the past was not as far gone as he had hoped, and the curse of the Palantíri was still waiting. The air in Rivendell's archives was heavy with the weight of ages. The stone walls, lined with ancient scrolls and forgotten tomes, whispered the secrets of 1,000 years. And yet, it was not the written word that drew Elenian today. It was the stone, the Palantir, a relic of a bygone era, one whose curse had haunted Middle-earth for centuries. Elenian's slender fingers trembled as they brushed over the surface of the orb, its dark, smooth surface reflecting the dim glow of the flickering candlelight. This was no ordinary stone. The air around it seemed to pulse, as if the very fabric of the world held its breath in anticipation. It was a Palantir, yes, but unlike any Elenian had seen before. This one was twisted, corrupted by forces older than time itself. The scholar's heart beat faster as his mind raced with questions. Where had this stone come from? How had it found its way to Rivendell? The others, those in power, had always dismissed the Palantíri as relics, mere tools for communication and foresight. But this one felt different. There was an aura to it, an energy that beckoned him closer, compelling him to look deeper, to understand. He set the stone on the wooden table before him, the sound of its smooth surface tapping against the wood somehow louder than it should have been. As Elenian studied it, he saw something faint at first, like the afterimage of a fading dream swirling in its depths. Visions. The stone was showing him something, first, it was a shadow, moving through a hall of stone, the flicker of firelight casting ominous shapes on the walls. Then, clearer still, he saw a figure, a man draped in dark robes, his face obscured by a cowl. Elenian felt an icy shiver run down his spine as he recognized the figure. The stone was showing him Saruman, the last wielder of the Palantír of Orthanc, a figure whose fall from grace had brought about so much destruction. A voice echoed in his mind, cold and commanding. You will see the path to power. You will understand the future. The words reverberated in his head, louder and clearer with each passing second. The stone's influence was undeniable, its power vast and unknowable. But there was something more, something darker. As the vision deepened, Elenian saw a great city Gondor, its mighty walls and towers standing tall, but slowly crumbling beneath the weight of unseen forces. The Palantír was showing him the fall of kings, the corruption of minds, the manipulation of hearts. The stone had not just been a tool for prophecy. It had been a weapon. A vision flickered Denethor, the steward of Gondor, standing before the Palantír of Osgiliath, his hand trembling as he reached for it. Elenian watched in horror as the stone's influence consumed the man. The king's eyes widened with madness, the flames of despair and hopelessness flickering in his gaze as he fell deeper into the stone's grasp. The madness that had taken him to the brink of self-destruction. It was the same curse, the same influence that had consumed Saruman, and before him, others. The vision shifted again, and Elenian felt a coldness settle deep within him. The stone, in its twisted state, was no mere relic. It was a vessel of Sauron's will, a dark artifact, cursed to corrupt and control. He recoiled, his heart racing as the full weight of the discovery pressed upon him. The Palantír was not just a tool of foresight. It was Sauron's instrument, his means of bending the wills of kings and lords to his own dark designs. The stone pulsed in his hands, as though alive, as though it knew he had uncovered its truth. Elenian's fingers tightened around it, but a voice, distant yet powerful, echoed in his mind. What is it that you seek, Elenian? The voice, though soft, carried the weight of centuries. It was Sauron's voice, speaking from the depths of the stone. No, Elenian whispered, his voice trembling. I must resist. But the stone would not relent. It had already begun its work on him, seeping into his thoughts, twisting his desires. He could feel its pull, urging him to learn more, to look deeper. And yet, in that moment, he understood. The curse of the Palantíri was not just in the visions they showed. It was in the way they ensnared the soul, the way they preyed upon ambition and fear, pulling their users into Sauron's web. His breath quickened. He knew what he must do. He could not allow this stone to fall into the wrong hands. It had already caused so much destruction. Too many had already fallen under its sway. He could feel the weight of its power, the terrible temptation to use it, But Elenian was not a fool. He knew the cost of wielding such power. He took one last look at the stone, his resolve hardening. The time had come to confront this dark relic. It could not be allowed to continue its legacy of manipulation and destruction. But as he prepared to act, he realized there was something else, something deeper. He could not simply destroy it. Elenian's eyes closed, and he felt a strange stillness fall over him. There was more at play here than mere corruption. The Palantir's curse was tied to something older, something even darker than Sauron. A force that had reached into the very heart of Middle-earth, manipulating, twisting,